You're just ordinary. Mom, you clean other people's houses. My son said that to me, his voice flat, indifferent, as if the words held no weight, no sting, as if reducing my life to a job I'd taken on to feed him and his sister was something casual. Forget the years I spent keeping them warm, fed, and safe. Forget the sacrifices. In that moment, I realized the person I had poured my soul into had become a stranger, and I, in his eyes, was a stain on the glass walls of his perfect life. My name is Daisy Gannon, and until last year, I was invisible, not just to strangers on the street or the homeowners who paid me to polish their floors and scrub their bathrooms, but to my own children. I used to believe there was no pain greater than heartbreak. That was before I learned what it felt like to be forgotten by the very people who once clung to my neck, begging for one more bedtime story. There's a particular kind of betrayal that comes from flesh and blood, from the children you gave everything for, when they begin to act like you're someone they've outgrown, someone they're embarrassed by. For over 30 years, I cleaned houses in Los Angeles. I'd wipe down marble countertops worth more than my entire year's income. I learned how to fold Egyptian cotton towels just the way the Beverly Hills wives liked them. And I did it all without shame until my own children made me feel like less than nothing. I wasn't always a cleaning lady. Once upon a time, I was the wife of a successful financial advisor, Henry Gannon. He swept me off my feet when I was 19, waiting tables at a greasy diner in East Hollywood. I thought I'd won the lottery. Within 6 months, I had a ring on my finger and dreams of a bright, beautiful life. I became a mother to 2 beautiful children, Isaac and Matilda. I gave up my education, my ambitions, even my own name to become Mrs. Henry Gannon. And I was happy, or at least I thought I was, until Henry left me for his 28-year-old secretary. A cliche, I know, but cliches hurt just the same when they're your life unraveling. He took everything: our home, our savings, our comfort. His lawyer was sharper than mine, and I was left with 2 teenagers and barely enough child support to buy groceries. So I started cleaning houses. At first, it was just to get by. But over time, I built a client list, learned the trade, and made something of my own. Still, nothing stung quite like realizing that in the eyes of my own children, my work, my survival was something shameful, something to hide behind champagne glasses and Instagram filters. I didn't set out to destroy anyone, but when the day came that my son invited me to his birthday party, not as a guest, but more like a footnote, I knew something had to change. Because the most loving thing a mother can sometimes do is let her children feel the full weight of their choices. The invitation came by text, not a call, not even a voicemail, just a short, impersonal message: Mom, I'm hosting a dinner party for my birthday next weekend. Can you come Saturday at 7? It had been years since Isaac invited me to anything birthdays included. Most of his celebrations took place in Cabo, Aspen, or private vineyards with Amber's social circle, worlds I didn't belong to, worlds I couldn't afford. I used to send birthday cards with $20 bills and handwritten notes. He never acknowledged them. So yes, I was surprised, hopeful, even. I replied immediately, I'd love to. What should I bring? Just yourself. Address is 124 Mulholland Drive. Of course, Mulholland Drive. Isaac and Amber had bought a house in the Hollywood Hills a few months earlier. I'd only ever seen glimpses on Instagram: concrete and glass, minimalist design, the kind of place that needed a code at the gate and a security system with voice recognition, the kind of house I'd cleaned. Not one I'd ever been invited into. I spent the week anxious, What should I wear? What should I say? I settled on a black dress I had bought years ago for a client's funeral. It was simple, elegant, and frankly, the nicest thing I owned. I had my hair trimmed and styled at the salon in the mall. And I bought a small gift, a vintage silver frame, with a photo of Isaac at age 5, laughing at the beach, hair tousled by salt water and wind. One of the happiest moments I remembered as a mother. I took the bus as close as I could, then ordered a rideshare for the last leg of the journey. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, clearly wondering what someone in department store heels and a Goodwill purse was doing in that zip code. Big party, he asked. My son's birthday, I said, with as much grace as I could manage. He lives here. The house was even more striking in person. Tall windows, stone walls, glowing lights cascading over an infinity pool. A driveway packed with Teslas and foreign cars I couldn't name. I rang the bell, gift in hand. The door opened before I could knock. Isaac stood there in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. For a moment, I saw the baby I once rocked to sleep. Then he stepped back and gestured me in without a hug. Everyone's out by the pool. Everyone. That one word made my stomach twist. I hadn't asked who everyone was. I should have. I followed him through the house, through rooms that looked like pages from an architecture magazine, until we stepped onto a vast terrace. Laughter echoed. Clinks of champagne glasses. I saw Henry immediately. My ex-husband, still charming, silver hair styled just so, and beside him Natalie, the woman he left me for, draped in red silk, effortlessly youthful. Oh, that's nice, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I didn't realize they'd be here. Dad helped with the down payment. Isaac replied with a shrug. He wanted to see the place. Of course he did. Henry always knew how to buy love with luxury. Vacations, condos, college tuition. Meanwhile, I'd scraped together enough to pay for braces and second-hand prom dresses. In Isaac's eyes, Henry was the provider. I was the leftover. Amber greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Daisy, what a surprise. I kissed her cheek. Happy birthday. Isaac, I said, handing him the gift. Thanks. Mom. He set it on a side table without opening it. He disappeared to get me a drink, and I stood there, awkward and alone. Matilda wasn't there. She hadn't been returning my calls lately. The last 3 lunch dates we'd planned canceled. A cold, a work emergency, a family dinner on Jacob's side. Always something. Henry approached, his voice the same low tone that once gave me butterflies. Daisy, you look well. Henry, I nodded, polite but guarded. Natalie wrapped her arm around his waist, smiling like we were old friends. Still with the cleaning company before I could answer, Isaac returned with a glass of wine. Here. Mom. Thanks. Is Matilda coming? Isaac's smile faltered. She's in Paris this week. Fashion Week. Of course. I tried to hold a conversation. I complimented the view. I asked about the artwork. I laughed politely, but the knot in my stomach kept tightening. I didn't belong here, not just socially, but emotionally. I was a prop, a relic from another time. Later, I found myself alone again, looking out over the city, all those twinkling lights. How many of those homes had I cleaned over the years? How many windows had I washed? How many toilets had I scrubbed so my children could stay in the same school district? No one here knew the cost of the life Isaac now lived, but I did. The calluses on my fingers, the cleaning supplies that had burned my skin, the fall that fractured my hand, which I couldn't afford to treat. These were the hands that held Isaac the day he was born, that packed his lunches and tucked him in at night. These were the hands he was ashamed of, and I knew, right then, that I should never have come. I turned away from the view, ready to find a bathroom to collect myself, and instead walked into Isaac's office. There, on his desk, was a framed photo. I stepped closer, hoping maybe it was the beach photo I'd just given him, already proudly displayed. No, it was a holiday portrait. Henry, Natalie, Isaac, and Matilda, smiling in front of a Christmas tree. I wasn't in it. They had erased me, not just from their events, their memories, but from their idea of family. My hands trembled. I set the frame down gently, and just as I turned to leave, Isaac walked in with a few of his friends. "Is this your mom?" one of them asked. The one you told us about, Isaac hesitated. "Yeah, this is my mom, Daisy." The rest unraveled from there. They asked about my work somewhat politely, but condescending all the same. Isaac jumped in quickly, trying to make it sound like I wasn't anything special, just ordinary. That word again, ordinary. "She cleans because she never finished college," he added, loud enough for them to hear. "She doesn't have many options," and something inside me broke, not sadness, not shame, but something harder, something final. I looked at my son, this man with my husband's jawline and my mother's eyes, and I realized he no longer saw me as a mother. I was a symbol, a cautionary tale, an old regret. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I picked up my purse. I walked past him, past Amber, past Henry and Natalie, and I left. I didn't cry on the ride home, not when I looked out the window at the city I had given so much to, not when I passed the neighborhoods where I used to clean houses just to keep food on the table, not even when I stepped into my tiny apartment in Glendale and kicked off my sensible shoes onto the worn-out rug I bought from a thrift store 10 years ago. But when I sat down on my little balcony, wine in hand, looking out at the twinkling lights of Los Angeles, something shifted. I thought of Isaac's words. "You're just ordinary, Mom, ordinary," as if that was a sin, as if there was shame in working with your hands, in waking up every morning to scrub someone else's floors, in folding someone else's laundry, so your children could grow up with full backpacks and shoes that fit, as if my value had ever been tied to what I did for a living, instead of why I did it. I took a long sip of wine and closed my eyes. They didn't know. They had no idea. They didn't know that for 15 years. I'd kept a secret that could change everything. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, an old habit I never broke. But instead of heading out with my mop and supplies, I made a different kind of call, a number I'd memorized but never used. "Mr. Worthington," I said when he picked up. "It's Daisy Gannon. I think it's time we had that conversation you've been wanting to have." Lawrence Worthington had been my ex-husband Henry's business partner back in the days when I still answered to Mrs. Gannon. They'd built a firm together, Gannon Worthington Financial. It was successful, lucrative, and corrupt in ways I didn't understand until it was too late. After the divorce, Lawrence reached out to me quietly, discreetly. He told me Henry had embezzled funds, hidden millions in offshore accounts. He'd offered to help me expose it. But back then, I said no. I was afraid of what it would do to Isaac and Matilda, afraid of what it would do to me. But now I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. His downtown office smelled like leather and quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. I'd cleaned penthouses with views like that, but never once sat across a desk from someone like Lawrence Worthington as an equal. "Mrs. Gannon," he said, folding his hands on the desk. I admit I was surprised to get your call. I changed my mind, I said calmly. Things change. He nodded, slid a thick folder across the desk. The documentation is all here. The offshore accounts, the transactions, everything Henry funneled through over the years. The statute of limitations on the tax fraud has expired, but the assets, he never disclosed them during your divorce. That's fraud, plain and simple. Half of it is legally yours. I opened the folder, account numbers, wire transfers, shell companies in the Caymans and Belize, but what mattered was the number at the bottom of the last page, $7.2 million. Money he'd hidden while I scrubbed toilets. Money that should have been mine. Why are you doing this? I asked. You could have turned him in years ago. Because Henry threw me under the bus. Worthington said. When the SEC started investigating us, he made sure all roads pointed to me. I lost my license, my reputation. I had to settle and rebuild from scratch. Meanwhile, he walked away clean. I nodded slowly. We were both casualties of the same man. And now, we were both ready to do something about it. That evening, I called a lawyer, not the timid, overworked one I used for my divorce. No, this man wore a suit that probably cost more than my month's rent and worked from the top floor of a Century City skyscraper. I showed him the documents. He barely blinked. You have a strong case, Mrs. Gannon. Divorce fraud is serious in California. We can move to reopen the settlement immediately. And if I want him to face consequences, I asked. He leaned back in his chair. We can pursue both legal action and public exposure. Are you prepared for that? I've been cleaning up other people's messes for 15 years. I said, I'm not afraid of ugly. The next stop was Venice Beach. I met Jessica Kwan, an investigative reporter from the Los Angeles Times. Lawrence had given me her name. Years ago, she'd tried to report on Henry's shady dealings, but the story was silenced. Not this time. I handed her a copy of the documents. Her eyes widened as she flipped through. This is explosive, she said. Why now? Because I finally realized family loyalty isn't always returned. I replied. She nodded. Give me 2 weeks. I'll verify everything. I disappeared from Isaac and Matilda's lives for 3 days. No calls, no texts, no explanations. The same silence they had once handed me. I returned in kind. On the 4th day, I found Matilda waiting outside my apartment. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Mom, where have you been? Isaac's freaking out. We thought something happened. Something did happen, I said, unlocking the door. I finally opened my eyes. Inside, she followed me like a stranger. She barely recognized the world I lived in. She never had. Look, I know the party didn't go well. Isaac feels awful. We didn't mean to. Didn't mean to make me feel ashamed. Didn't mean to erase me. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I showed her the folder. Your father stole over $7 million during the divorce. He hid it offshore. This is proof. She froze. That's not possible. Dad, he wouldn't. He did. I've known for 15 years. I kept quiet. For you. For Isaac. But that silence cost me everything. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why now? Because I finally understand something you don't love without respect isn't love. It's obligation. She looked lost. So what now? Now I reclaim what's mine. You'll ruin him. He ruined me first. She stood to leave. You'll regret this. I met her eyes. No, I won't. I didn't hear from Matilda again for several days after she stormed out of my apartment. And truthfully, I didn't expect to. I knew that look in her eyes panic mixed with betrayal. But the betrayal wasn't because her father had stolen millions. It was because I had finally chosen myself over the narrative they'd constructed. A narrative where I was supposed to be grateful to exist on the margins of their glossy lives. I had spent 30 years putting them first. Now I was finally doing what I should have done long ago, putting myself at the center of the story. The Los Angeles Times published Jessica's article on a quiet Sunday morning. The headline was bold and unmistakable: Financial advisor accused of hiding millions in offshore accounts. During divorce, ex-wife speaks out. My name was right there in the third paragraph. Daisy Gannon, ex-wife of Henry Gannon, provided documentation revealing that he had hidden over $7 million in assets during their divorce proceedings. I sat at my tiny dining table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, reading every word slowly. Jessica had done her homework. She didn't just expose the fraud from our divorce. She tied it back to the earlier SEC investigation, the one Henry had escaped with nothing more than a slap on the wrist. She'd spoken with former clients who suspected they'd been swindled but never had proof. She'd traced a pattern of deceit that stretched across decades. And she'd gotten a quote from Henry. Of course, these allegations are completely baseless, he told her. My ex-wife is a disturbed woman seeking revenge for imagined slights. Imagined slights. 15 years of cleaning strangers' toilets while he bought Malibu beach houses for his new family. That was a lot of imagination. By 10 my phone had already rung over 20 times. Henry, Isaac, Matilda, even Natalie. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I waited for one call, the one that came from my lawyer. Mrs. Gannon, he said. I assume you've seen the article, every word. I replied. Henry's attorney reached out. They'd like to discuss a settlement. Of course they did. Apparently, several of Henry's clients had already called his firm demanding answers. Some threatened to pull their investments. Reputations are fragile things, especially when they're built on lies. They're offering $3 million, my lawyer said. Half the documented offshore funds. They claim the rest no longer exists. I didn't hesitate. Not acceptable. I want half of everything. All assets acquired since our divorce. The Malibu house, his stake in the firm, everything. He paused. That's an aggressive position. He stole 15 years of my life. I'm simply collecting what's due. Later that afternoon, Isaac showed up at my apartment. He didn't call first, just rang the buzzer like it was still his right to walk through my door. I almost didn't let him in, but something in me wanted to see his face, to see if there was any trace of the little boy who used to sit in my lap while I read Goodnight Moon. He looked worn, pale, his usual polished confidence replaced by something sharper, more brittle. Mom, he said, stepping inside. We need to talk. I didn't offer him a seat. Go ahead. He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. My boss called me this morning. Clients are panicking. They think I was part of it that I knew. Do you understand what this could do to my career? I crossed my arms. Did you? What did you know your father hid money during the divorce? He blinked. No, of course not. Then maybe you should be more concerned with the man who actually committed the fraud than the woman who exposed it. His jaw clenched. You blindsided us. Mom, you didn't even warn us. I almost laughed. Isaac, I've spent most of your adult life warning you, in silence, in patience, in sacrifice. You just weren't listening. He paced the small room like a trapped animal, the walls too close, the truth too loud. Matilda's a wreck. Her in-laws are talking about postponing the baby shower. They don't want this scandal attached to their name. Then maybe she should have thought twice before choosing appearance over truth. He stopped pacing. You're really not going to stop this, no. Isaac, I'm not. For the first time in decades, I'm standing up for myself. His voice rose, frustrated. This is revenge, plain and simple. I stared at him. No, revenge is petty. This is justice. He opened his mouth again. But I was done. You can go now. He hesitated. I didn't mean what I said at the party. Yes, you did, I said softly. And that's the part that hurts the most. That night, I poured another glass of wine and stood on my balcony. The city stretched out before me like a field of stars. Somewhere out there, Henry was scrambling to contain the fallout. Natalie was probably trying to spin a new PR narrative. Isaac and Matilda were facing the ripple effects of the values they'd inherited from their father. And me, for the first time in my life, I wasn't holding anyone else's mess. I was holding power, not out of spite, but out of truth. Justice was slow, cold, unforgiving, and finally, it was mine. The knock came just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone, but deep down, I knew who it would be. When I opened the door, there he stood, Henry. His once confident stance had shifted. The power he used to wear, like a second skin, now looked more like a costume he wasn't sure still fit. The expensive suit, the polished shoes, they were all there, but something in his posture had frayed. Daisy, he said, his voice tight. We need to talk. I didn't answer. I didn't step aside to let him in either. I just stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance to the quiet, modest life he had once deemed worthless. What could we possibly have left to say? Henry, he took a breath, adjusted his cufflinks, stalling. That was always his move when things slipped out of his control. That article, you've damaged my reputation. My firm is hemorrhaging clients. You've stirred up a storm over something that happened 15 years ago. Something you did 15 years ago. I corrected, not just happened. You did this. His jaw twitched. We both know it wasn't that simple. I stepped back and crossed my arms. Tell me, Henry, how simple was it to open an offshore account while your wife begged the grocery clerk to let her post-date a check for milk? That shut him up. After a pause, he ran a hand through his silver hair. I didn't come here to fight. I came to make things right. I let out a dry laugh. You want to make things right now that your empire is crumbling, now that your reputation, your true God, is at risk. He pushed past me into the apartment. I didn't stop him. I was curious to see how long he could pretend to be the man he once was. He looked around, nose wrinkling slightly. This is where you live. Yes, I replied evenly. This is where I've lived for the past 15 years, while you were buying properties in the hills and drinking $100 bottles of wine. He turned to face me. This isn't about the money. Is it, you're doing this to punish me, to punish the kids? That stopped me cold. The kids, I took a step closer. Don't you dare hide behind them. Henry, you're not doing this for them, and I'm not doing this to them. I'm doing this because of you, because of what you taught them, because they grew up believing that the parent who worked with her hands was somehow less worthy than the one who paid for ski trips and college tuition with stolen money. They're hurting, he said, softer now. Isaac's job is on the line. Matilda's in-laws want nothing to do with this scandal. You've turned their lives upside down. No, Henry, you did that when you made fraud the foundation of their success. I'm just shining a light on it. He ran a hand down his face. So what do you want? What's your price? I stared at him. So many years I dreamed of him saying those words. I'd imagined demanding it all back, the money, the house, the life he stole. But now it was about something else. I want everything that's mine, every cent you hid, every piece of property you bought with money that should have gone into our children's mouths. And I want the world to know what kind of man you are. So that's it, he said bitterly. You want revenge. No, Henry, I want freedom and justice. The kind you never gave me the chance to seek because I was too busy raising our kids and working myself raw so they wouldn't feel your absence. He stared at me for a long time, and I could see it the moment he realized he'd lost control of the narrative. The moment he finally saw me not as the cleaning lady he discarded, but as the woman he underestimated. You really think you can win this? He asked quietly. I already have, I said. The lawsuit moved fast. My lawyer filed a motion to reopen the divorce settlement, citing fraud, concealed assets, and intentional misrepresentation. Henry's legal team fought back hard, of course, but the documents Worthington gave me were airtight. There were signatures, account numbers, transaction trails, and the statute of limitations already expired on the tax evasion, but not on the divorce fraud. Within weeks, Henry's name was everywhere. Local news, financial blogs, cable talk shows. One headline read, "From power broker to courtroom defendant, the fall of Henry Gannon." The same week, his firm lost two of its biggest clients. I received an unexpected visitor, Matilda. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her makeup was barely holding, and her voice trembled when she spoke. Mom, please. Can't we just talk? I let her in. She sat on my couch like she didn't recognize it. Or me. I know you're angry. She started. I know we've hurt you. But this is tearing everything apart. Isaac can't sleep. Jacob's parents are threatening to cancel the wedding. We feel like we're drowning. I poured myself a glass of water and sat across from her. Matilda, do you remember when you were 10 and you broke your wrist falling off the jungle gym? She blinked. Yes. You screamed like the world was ending, but you had to sit in pain for 2 hours at that clinic because I couldn't afford to take you anywhere else. Your father had just moved out. I had nothing, but I held your good hand the entire time. Remember, tears welled in her eyes. I did everything I could with what little I had. I chose you, over and over, even when you didn't choose me back. She whispered, I'm sorry. I don't need your apology. I need you to grow up, to understand that this mess didn't start with me speaking the truth. It started when your father decided to bury it. But we're family, she said. I stood, walked to the window. No, Matilda, family is who shows up. Family is who holds you when you're broken, not who breaks you for convenience. She rose, slowly. You really won't stop this. I turned and looked her straight in the eyes. No, and deep down, you know I shouldn't. 2 days later, Henry offered a full settlement, half of all assets, retroactive alimony, penalties. It was everything I had demanded, everything I had earned. I signed the papers in silence, not because I wasn't proud, but because the peace I felt didn't need a celebration. It was quiet, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. That night, I took the beach photo of Isaac, the one he never opened, and placed it back in its frame, not to give to him, but to keep for myself. Because for the first time in my life, I was reclaiming not just what had been taken, I was reclaiming me. After I signed the settlement papers, everything felt still, not triumphant, not dramatic, just still. It was as if the noise that had been screaming inside me for 15 years had finally quieted down. All the sacrifices, all the silence, all the humiliation, I had folded them away like old linens and stored them in a place where they could no longer touch me. Henry paid every cent. His firm took a massive hit. His reputation crumbled. He stepped down voluntarily, as the press release claimed. Natalie left town for a wellness retreat in Arizona, though I suspect she simply didn't want to be recognized at Whole Foods. Isaac kept his job. Barely. Matilda postponed the baby shower, but not the baby, which she tearfully texted me about one morning. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but because I was no longer their emotional cleanup crew. I had other plans. With the settlement, I could have moved anywhere. I could have bought a condo in Santa Monica or a cottage up north, but I didn't want marble countertops or a zip code that screamed arrival. I wanted peace. So I booked myself a 2-week stay at a quiet coastal resort I'd once cleaned for a client. I remembered how serene it was, tucked away off Highway 1 with sweeping views of the ocean and cliffs that dropped straight into blue. Back then, I'd polished their teak deck while the owner sipped cocktails and said things like, "Isn't it magical here?" Yes. I'd thought, it is. For people like you. Now it was for people like me, too. When I checked in, the receptionist smiled at me the same way she used to smile at my old clients. "Welcome to Pelican Cove, Miss Gannon. Your suite is ready." Suite. I had never slept in a suite in my life. The room had French doors that opened to a private balcony, a freestanding tub, and sheets so soft they felt like silk on my skin. I didn't unpack right away. I just stood on the balcony, closed my eyes, and listened to the waves crash below. This was mine, every morning. I woke up early and walked the shoreline barefoot, letting the cold water numb the soles of my feet. I collected shells without caring if they were perfect. I drank coffee on the balcony, not because I had to be awake for a job, but because I wanted to be awake for life. I spent hours in the resort's library, flipping through books I'd never had time to read when I was raising kids and working 6 days a week. I painted a little, 2 just watercolors, nothing fancy, nothing I'd show anyone, but it felt good to create something that wasn't tied to survival. It felt like breathing. One evening, I joined a small writing workshop hosted by the resort. The instructor asked us to write about a moment that changed our lives. I stared at the blank page for a long time. There were so many moments. I could have chosen the day Henry left, the day Isaac called me ordinary, the moment I opened that folder from Worthington. But I didn't write about any of those. Instead, I wrote about a Tuesday morning, the first one I spent there. I was sitting on the deck, wrapped in a robe, sunlight warming my face, and I realized I didn't feel tired. Not the physical kind of tired, but the soul kind. The heaviness that settles in your bones when you've been dismissed and overlooked and used up for years. I wasn't tired anymore. I was free. When I returned to Glendale 2 weeks later, my apartment looked different, smaller. Yes, but not in a bad way. Like it no longer had to carry the weight of every regret I'd kept tucked between its walls. I walked in, dropped my bags, and stood in the quiet. The air felt lighter. The silence didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. There was a stack of mail on the table, a few cards, probably from Isaac and Matilda. I didn't open them right away. Instead, I unpacked my suitcase slowly. I placed a small seashell on my windowsill, hung a watercolor on the wall not because it was good, but because I had made it. Later that evening, I took out the photo album, the one I had nearly thrown away. I flipped through pictures of birthdays and holidays, missing teeth, and first days of school. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I simply remembered. And then I put it away, carefully, like closing the final chapter of a book I'd read too many times. A week later, I donated most of my cleaning supplies to a women's shelter. The agency I used to work for, called Someone, had referred me to a high-paying client. I politely declined. I wasn't a cleaner anymore. I wasn't just anything anymore. I was Daisy Gannon, a woman who had spent a lifetime putting everyone else first and had finally chosen herself. I didn't need to be admired or rescued or included in anyone else's version of success. I had found my own version, quiet, steady, true, sometimes. I still walk past the houses I used to clean. They haven't changed much, same manicured lawns, same towering hedges, same shiny cars in the driveway. But when I see them now, I don't feel bitterness. I feel distance, a distance I crossed. They once looked down at me from balconies and second floors. Now I look back from the edge of peace, and I know deep in my bones that I don't belong to that world. I belong to mine. People often ask me if I regret it, if I regret pulling back the curtain on my ex-husband's lies, if I regret letting the truth cost me the fragile relationships I had with my children, if I regret walking out of that birthday party with my head held high and never looking back. The answer is no. I regret waiting so long to stop apologizing for who I am. For years, I let shame take up space in my life. Shame for the way my marriage ended. Shame for scrubbing other people's kitchens while my kids attended college on scholarships arranged by their father. Shame for being invisible in the very story I had helped build. But shame, I've learned, is a lie we're taught to carry so that others can stay comfortable. It took losing everything, my marriage, my status, even my children's respect for me to understand that dignity doesn't come from titles or bank accounts. It comes from living your truth. And for the first time in my life, that's exactly what I'm doing. I don't talk to Henry anymore. We have nothing left to say. Matilda still sends the occasional update, a photo of her baby, a belated holiday card. I respond with warmth, but I keep the distance. I love her. Of course I do, but I no longer shrink myself to earn that love. Isaac called once, a few months after the article broke. He didn't say much, just told me he was sorry for how he treated me. I told him I appreciated it. That forgiveness was possible, but trust takes time, and I was giving myself as much time as I needed. It wasn't about punishment. It was about healing. And healing, I've come to realize, is not something you do with those who hurt you. It's something you do after them. These days, I wake up without dread in my chest. I make my coffee slowly, sit by the window, and let the sun warm my face. I read books I never had time for, tend to my little balcony garden, and occasionally I paint, not because I'm good at it, but because it feels good to create something that doesn't need to be perfect to matter. Some afternoons, I volunteer at a local shelter, teaching basic budgeting to women starting over. They remind me so much of myself in the early days, frightened, ashamed, trying to find solid ground in a world that treats them like afterthoughts. I tell them what no one told me. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially not the people who built their comfort on your sacrifice. The way they look at me, eyes wide, sometimes misty, it reminds me that everything I went through wasn't wasted. It was a seed, and now I get to watch it bloom in someone else's hands. The most surprising part of all this, I found peace, not in revenge, but in clarity. I thought bringing Henry to justice would be the pinnacle that the courtroom win, the headline, the money would feel like vindication. But no, that wasn't it. It was that quiet moment, sitting on a beach, barefoot in the sand, when I realized I had finally stopped cleaning up other people's messes and started tending to my own soul. For decades, I waited for someone to see me, to acknowledge the work I did, the love I gave, the weight I carried. But I've learned that the most powerful recognition isn't the kind that comes from others. It's the moment you look in the mirror and finally see yourself and like what's looking back. So if you're listening to this and you've been made to feel small, invisible, or just anything, just a cleaner, just a mother, just a woman who got left behind, I want you to hear me now. You are not just anything. You are the force that held everything together when no one else noticed it was falling apart. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to outgrow the roles they gave you. And if that makes people uncomfortable, let them sit in that discomfort. It's not your job to shrink so they can stretch. I used to think I had wasted my life trying to prove my worth to people who never cared to see it. But I don't believe that anymore, because every single time I bent over to scrub a floor, I was building something far stronger than any mansion. I was building a soul that couldn't be bought or broken. And now, in this chapter of my life, this unexpected, quiet, liberating chapter, I finally get to live as that soul, whole, unapologetic, free. If my story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own journey, or gave you the strength to speak your truth, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what part of your story you're ready to reclaim, because someone out there needs to hear it, just like I once needed to hear it, too. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, stories that honor the quiet strength, the overlooked resilience, and the fierce beauty of women who finally stop asking for permission. Let's keep speaking. Let's keep healing together. A few months after the lawsuit settled and the article faded from the headlines, I received a letter. It came in a pale blue envelope with no return address. For a moment, I thought it might be another anonymous note from someone judging my decision to go public, or maybe another lawyer trying to stir the embers of what had already burned. But when I opened it, I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Mrs. Abernathy, one of the first clients I had when I started cleaning houses all those years ago. She was older than me, widowed, and lived in a sprawling Spanish-style home with too many rooms and a garden she loved more than most people. I hadn't worked for her in almost a decade, but I still remembered how she used to sit on the veranda while I scrubbed her kitchen tiles, humming old Ella Fitzgerald songs. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of cream paper and a photo me, standing in her backyard, holding a tray of lemonade. Matilda was with me, maybe 7 years old, clinging to my waist with her sun hat tilted sideways. We both looked happy. The letter read, Daisy, I saw your name in the paper. I never forgot your kindness. The way you loved your children, it was a light. I hope they see that one day. In case they don't, please know I did. I must have read that line 20 times, not because it was long or poetic, but because it was true. That photograph, that moment captured in faded color, reminded me of who I really was, long before the bitterness, before the betrayal, before the silence. A mother, a woman, trying her best with what she had. There was love in that photo, simple, unvarnished love, and no lawsuit, no betrayal, no erasure could rewrite that truth. I placed the photo on my bookshelf next to my paints and sea glass jars, not to cling to the past, but to remember the version of me that had always been there, waiting to be seen. In the months that followed, people began to reach out, not just Matilda and Isaac, but strangers, women from all over the country who had heard my story, who said things like, "I thought I was the only one. You gave me the courage to speak up. I finally filed for divorce after 22 years of being made to feel worthless." Their messages humbled me. They reminded me that what happened in that Hollywood Hills mansion wasn't just my reckoning. It was part of something larger, a quiet revolution of women who'd been overlooked, underestimated, and overburdened, finally standing up and saying, "Enough." One Saturday morning, I received another visit I didn't expect. Matilda showed up at my door, holding her infant son. Her eyes were tired, the way mine used to be when she was little, but her face had softened. Her voice was quiet. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't say much at first, just stood in my living room, looking around, rocking the baby in her arms. There was no tension this time, no expectation, just space and a silence that felt like the beginning of something, not the end. She eventually sat down, placed the baby on her lap, and said, "You were right, that's all." She didn't need to explain. I understood. "I know," I said. She reached into her diaper bag and pulled out an old drawing one I'd forgotten even existed. It was crumpled at the edges, drawn with waxy crayon strokes on construction paper. A lopsided stick figure, labeled Mom, standing under a bright orange sun. "I found this in a box at Dad's place," she said. "I guess I made it in kindergarten." I looked at it for a long time. I kept thinking, why did it take me 30 years to remember who you were? I swallowed hard. Because people only remember what they want to when it's convenient. And sometimes, love requires a reckoning before it can return. We sat quietly after that. The baby gurgled in his sleep. Matilda looked out the window at my herbs, swaying in the breeze. And for the first time in years, she didn't seem afraid to be still. She stayed the whole afternoon. We made tea. She asked about my garden. I showed her a watercolor I'd finished that week. When she left, she hugged me, not stiffly, not out of obligation, but like a daughter clinging to a truth she thought she had lost. I don't know what the future holds for us. I don't expect some storybook reunion. I don't need one. What I need, what I have, is peace. The kind that comes when you finally stopped asking to be chosen, because I've already chosen myself. And now, my story isn't about what was taken. It's about what I reclaimed, my name, my worth, my voice. So if you're still here, listening, let me tell you this. It's never too late. Not too late to start over. Not too late to speak up. Not too late to stop letting people write your story for you. Your past may shape you, but it doesn't own you. You own you. If this story moved you in any way, leave a comment below. Share your own story, your own moment of clarity. Someone out there might be waiting for a sign, and your voice might just be it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Real, honest, human. We all carry something. But we don't have to carry it alone anymore. Let's walk forward together. There's a kind of strength that only comes from being pushed to your breaking point and then choosing to rise anyway. When I first walked out of that luxury house party, I wasn't walking away from just a son's birthday or a night of cold champagne. I was walking away from years of silence, shame, and being treated like an afterthought in the very lives I had built with my own hands. I used to believe that motherhood meant sacrificing everything, even your self-worth. But I've learned that love without respect is just obligation dressed up to look noble. And I refuse to wear that costume anymore. Now, I live in a small apartment filled with herbs on the balcony and books from the library. It may not be glamorous, but it's mine. And for the first time in decades, I belong to myself. Life doesn't always reward the quiet ones, the caregivers, the ones who hold it all together in the background. But that doesn't make their worth any less. If you've ever felt overlooked, diminished, or like your story didn't matter, this is your reminder it does. You matter. Speak up. Stand tall and choose yourself. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe your words will help someone else feel seen too. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that honor resilience, truth, and the quiet courage it takes to start over.